next week, and as you know, I'm going to actually this weekend. I'm going to be traveling to Tulsa, Oklahoma. I've been invited to be a guest speaker at a Red Pill Expo event that's taking place in Tulsa. I was invited by the gentleman running the event is G. Edward Griffin. He's the gentleman that wrote the book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, about the how the Fed started. And he's actually been looking for years into the whole problem with Marxism. Way back in the 1960s, he started warning about Marxism's march through the institutions and the fact that we need to be watch out for what's happening. And boy, he was spot on the money, because so he's asked me to come there. I think he likes my story, Cornelia, because he likes the fact that a private citizen, first of all, said no to taking the vaccines in a spectacular way, right? When I, didn't take the COVID jabs. And, what we can do is we can actually run through the slides of the presentation I'm going to give this weekend, if you'd like to. Maybe do a little dry run on it. Maybe you can help me out in some of the things that I should say during my presentation coming up this weekend. What do you say?
So this is the guy, right? Edward Griffin?
Yes, G. Edward Griffin, correct.
He's the author of The Creature.
It's an unusual name for a book, but if the book is about the Fed. It's about the creation of the Fed back in, I think, the 19-teens, and our whole money system in the United States and how the money system works. Many people think that the Fed needs to end, and then we ought to go back to sound money, like we had before Nixon took us off the gold standard.
So this is going to be this weekend, and there's some interesting speakers. Alex Newman is there, Michael Yon. Mm-hmm. There you are.
There I am. So I think I've been given about a half hour to give a speech during that event. I'm not sure whether I'll be speaking Saturday or Sunday, but I've got a slide deck prepared. If you want to go through them, I can give the audience a little idea of what I'm going to talk about at this weekend when I attend that.
Okay, that's it, right?
Yep. So I was going to call the presentation Why Doctors and Embalmers Fear to Speak Out About Deadly Vaccines and Killer Blood Clots. But if you go to the next slide.
Well, first, I like this title. Why doctors and embalmers fear to speak out about deadly vaccines and killer blood clots. Yeah, why?
Well, we've already talked about it a little bit, haven't we? About the fact that they may not want to participate in surveys where they actually, after they mandated their employees take the jabs. So, but if you go to the next slide, you'll see Ed actually suggested an alternate title for it, because it applies to more than just embalmers, funeral directors, and doctors and nurses. It applies to all of us, because that was a time where we were all put under a lot of pressure, a lot of fear. There was a big psyop going on, a lot of pressure on all of us to wear masks, take the jabs, that kind of stuff. And people have to be able to understand when something is wrong and then stand up to it, have the courage to stand up and say no. So this is a briefing about drawing your line in the sand.
Right.
So if you go to
But to come back to this, I mean, it's such a fascinating question. Why is it? And I think one reason is that these weird, white, fibrous, tough clots are so frightening, or they're like Frankenstein clots. They are so bizarre and threatening, and you don't want to have that thing in you. You don't want to have that. You don't want anyone else to have such a thing in you. It's so horrifying somehow that you have every incentive to not acknowledge it and to try not to think about it and not to bring attention to it. Now you would think, well, that should not be true for doctors and embalmers who are professionals, right? They should be dealing with this in a professional way. It shouldn't be true. But they took the vaccines, though. They took the so-called vaccines themselves. And so they are all, or a lot of them at least did. So they are all afraid that these Frankenstein clots might be forming in themselves too. And that is such a scary thought that even if there weren't all the political disincentives to say anything, even then, maybe people would want to stick their hands into the sand and try not to think about what this means.
That was definitely a factor. Definitely a factor. And of course, money was a factor too, right? They held your job over your head. And doctors knew if they spoke out about the shots, then they would, you'd have their board certifications taken away, their licenses taken
Exactly.
away.
So you take this inane animal fear of these bizarre calamari clots that are scary. You take that in addition to all the other things. You might lose your job. You might lose your license. You will be canceled, silenced, ostracized. You might lose your friends. You take that all together, and I think that gives you a good part of the answer why there is this pervasive fear. What is really truly amazing is that this is still the case now, like almost 6 months into the new administration, because I don't think, well, you're the expert on this. Has anybody in any of the HHS agencies, anybody acknowledged and talked about these white clots?
None, not yet. And I've tried every path I can. Like I said, going through our, well-known people like Dr. McCullough, Steve Kirsch, Dr. Malone. It's unfortunate that the people that are actually in the power seats in the FDA, CDC, and NIH, and HHS have not yet done anything with the information that I provided to them. Because this is the most spectacular of all the side effects, right? The others are amazing too, but this is the one you can see. These things physically exist, and it's, as you can see from the surveys, it's in quite a few high percentage of corpses. So it should be getting looked at, right? It shouldn't be getting ignored by our 3-letter agencies.
Yeah, it's absolutely stunning. It's absolutely stunning that nobody has talked about it. The silence,
But it takes courage.
Silence.
That's why that second slide that G. Edward Griffin suggested, that may be a better title for this, because that's what it boils down to. People need to have the courage, despite the fact that it might put their job on the line, despite the fact that it might hurt their friendships and their relationships with people. There may be sacrifices that you have to make, but it's important to speak the truth, especially on something as serious as this, that's killing people and injuring people. So if you go to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit at the expo about how in 2020, before the vaccines came around, people were scared, right? The news was telling us that 3% of people that catch COVID could die from it. The real number turned out to be about 0.3%, right? So the survival rate for COVID was 99.7%, and the average age of death was around 80 years old, which is the average age of death before COVID even came around. So then in the next year, 2021, it got scarier, right? Because then they came out with the COVID-19 vaccines. At first, they kindly asked you to take the vaccine. Then they began to bribe you. Remember that? They would offer things like small amounts of money, cheeseburgers, they had raffles for kids going to college, maybe get part of your college tuition paid for. But then they came the mandates. They got tired of us unvaccinated that didn't want to take the shots. So then the tyrants really showed their true teeth by mandating the shots, saying, hey, if you don't get this shot, you're going to lose your job. You're not going to be able to travel. You're not going to be able to go to college. You're not going to be able to go to a restaurant or a sporting event. It turned into tyranny.
Yes, and what I would also mention here is that was for me, that was one of the reddest flags ever early in 2020, namely when every effort was made to make it impossible for people to get their hands on therapeutics that worked, like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine. The demonization of effective treatment,
didn't they? It set the stage in 2020 for saying that the vaccine is the only thing that can cure us, by, like you say, denying people the ability to take ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, all these therapeutics that could have helped you to keep you out of the hospital in the first place. Absolutely right, Cornelia. Absolutely right. So next slide. So this is me and the lovely Mrs. Haviland. My wife's from Kenya, Africa.
Oh wow, and, that is such a nice picture of you two.
Well, thank you. That was one of my last pictures in uniform. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, you look so bright-eyed and bushy-tailed there. How many years ago is that?
Oh, that's quite at least 16 years ago, maybe 20 years ago.
Oh wow!
But
so your wife is from Kenya?
Yes, she is. And as you know, Kenya had very low uptakes of the COVID-19 vaccine. And guess what? They've had no problems with excess mortality the last 4 or 5 years, like we were talking about early. earlier.
Right.
Yeah.
So your wife, what's your wife's name?
Joy.
Joy. So does Joy still have family in Kenya?
Yes, she does. In fact, all her family's in Kenya. She's the only one here.
Oh, I see. So you travel, so you probably travel with her regularly to Kenya to see her family.
Except we have never been back since COVID and the vaccines came out. So last time we traveled there was a couple years before the pandemic hit.
So how did her family in Kenya react to all that?
You know, we don't talk about it much. I don't think most of her family took the vaccines at all because she's from a small village about 70 miles north of Nairobi. Most of the people that took the vaccine in Kenya were city dwellers in the Nairobi area, the capital of Kenya. Mm-hmm. But most of the rest of the country out in the countryside probably didn't have access to the vaccines. And that's actually a good thing.
Yes.
I'm glad most of her family wasn't jabbed.
Yeah. Well, Bill Gates is hellbent to change that. I mean, he's really targeting Africa.
He wants to bring the vaccines to everyone.
The remotest, most rural corners in Africa.
Oh, boy. No, thank you, Bill Gates. I was working at that time in October of 2021 at Wright Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio, in a F-16 shot. This is a picture of the F-16 Falcon. I also have worked in the past with the F-22 Raptor, also the F-117 stealth fighter. The job that I was working at that time, I was a defense contractor at Wright Patterson, and I was working on a program that was we were upgrading jets for the F-16s for the countries of Singapore and South Korea. I got to travel to Singapore and South Korea quite often. Also, about every other month, I'd go to Lockheed Martin's Fort Worth facility in Texas. They were modifying 4 of these aircraft to do flight testing to make sure all the new electronics they were putting on board for the Singaporeans and the South Koreans were functioning properly. Loved my job. Now you can go to the next slide.
So you worked to maintain these F-16 fighter jets?
I oversaw work to upgrade these jets. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, as an engineer.
I didn't work on them. I didn't put the tools on there myself. I oversaw work that was done by Lockheed Martin in upgrading the jets.
Okay, and these are the missiles here, right? So there's a missile here. Is this a missile too?
Yep, those are all ordnances.
This is a missile. Yep. So they put them wherever they can. So there are two on the wings, and then 1, 2 on this side, probably 3, 4. So it's like 6 missiles altogether that this one is carrying.
Oh yeah, these aircraft can carry multiple ordnances of different sizes and different abilities, and as well as guns right out the needle of the nose there.
Oh, this thing here, this needle thing. I was wondering about
that's
that.
A gun.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. So this picture here, is this while you were working as a contractor? Because you're wearing Army uniform.
No, that's not me. This is a 3-star Air Force general. If you notice, he's got 3 stars on his shoulder.
Oh,
this is Lieutenant.
Oh, I thought it was
General. Lieutenant General Carl E. Schaefer, who was the gentleman who sent out the email to the entire base in October saying the dates we had to get our shots by, the military, the government civilians, and myself, defense contractor, or else get kicked out.
God, I'm sorry, Tom. I mistook him for you. And I thought, oh my God, Tom has so many medals. He must have. But you're right. No, he does.
As many medals as he had, he was a coward that day.
You do look a little bit similar, though, or not?
He was a coward that day, though. What he did is he sent an email to the whole base, like I said, saying the dates we had to get our shots by. As you know, Cornelia, I sent him back an email. Right?
Yes.
And I said, shame on you. No, actually, that's a document I combined with the email.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So basically, I sent him back an email saying, shame on you. Instead of standing up for our right to decide for ourselves whether or not to take an experimental shot, you chose to spend your time trying to guilt us into taking the jab. Shame on you. And as you know, I didn't just send that email to him. I sealed my fate that day by sending it, CCing all 30,000 people that work at Wright Patterson Air Force Base.
I know.
And I lost my $165,000 a year job a half hour later when my boss called me and said, you're fired, because I shamed the Air Force 3-star in front of the whole base. But somebody had to do it. He was a coward. He didn't push back on behalf of his troops. Neither did the colonels below him. They all just followed along, say, hey, I'm just following orders. How many times have you heard that in the past as an excuse? The good news is Pete Hegseth came out about a month or so ago and said that wasn't an illegal order that all those generals, colonels, and admirals gave to their troops. So he admitted there was an illegal order to demand the troops be, injected with an experimental drug. So I'm happy that he did that.
An illegal order. So what is the name of this 3-star general again?
Carl E. Schaefer.
Carl Schaefer. So Carl Schaefer was in charge. General Carl Schaefer was, or maybe still is, in charge of this huge base in Ohio where you worked.
Correct. He was the main commanding officer of Wright Patterson Air Force Base.
Okay, and he decided
it's called AFMC, Air Force Material Command, I believe.
Okay, so, and he gave the order that everybody working at that Air Force base had to take the vaccine, the shots. Correct?
Yeah, what do you think he's thinking now, Cornelia, when he sees all these people stopping, taking the shots, not taking it any longer, when he knows now that's been called an illegal order, when he sees people that are vaccine injured? How do you think this gentleman feels now?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I have no idea. But back then, he probably received an order himself, I would think, namely the order to order, from the Secretary of Defense, namely the order that everybody at his base, even contractors, including contractors, correct?
Yes, but we take an oath as an officer to obey all lawful orders given to us, but we also take an oath to disobey any unlawful order given to us.
How do you differentiate between lawful and unlawful orders?
That's a good question. I would think a violation of the Nuremberg Code would be one reason to. I think the mandating of an experimental drug, somebody taking an experimental drug, is pretty obviously an unlawful order to be given.
I agree, but back then,
I don't think it takes much of a conscience to say that you shouldn't mandate an experimental drug on anybody. So I don't think it was a big call. I don't think they have any leg to stand on to say, oh, that's a lawful order. Like I said, Pete Hegseth said it was not. So
right, but of course, when he gave that order, he said, I mean, he might not have said it in so many words, but he was of the opinion that this was indeed a lawful order, and that anyone who objected to the order was, I don't know.
I don't think so. I think he knew it was an unlawful order, but he gave it anyways out of cowardice. So he didn't want to push back. He could have pushed back upstairs. He should have said, "This is morally wrong. This is wrong to do."
Were there any other generals in charge of big military bases?
No generals that I know
States?
of, or admirals. I think there were a few colonels that stood up and said, "I'm not going to make my troops get this," and they actually retired out of the service rather than give the order to their troops to make them take the drug. But I don't believe any generals or admirals. I think they all just
went along.
Just went along, bowed the knee.
Is he still in charge of that base?
I'm guessing he's probably retired by now.
Right.
I don't know.
Did you know him personally?
No, I never met the gentleman.
Oh, did you ever see him?
On the base? No, because the Wright Pat's two separate parts. There's an Area A and Area B. His office was in Area A. I was located in Area B.
So how many of the soldiers at that base refused to take the shots?
I would surmise probably very, very few. Probably well over 95% of the gals and guys in uniform wound up taking that shot. And many of them did it against their will. They didn't want to take the shot, but they had to. They felt they had to, or else give up their entire career. Because that was the threat they were saying. You could have 13, 14, 15 years in, maybe 18 or 19 years in a service, and be stripped of your entire 20-year retirement by not taking the jab.
Exactly.
So there was tremendous coercion upon the troops to take the shot.
What's your gut feeling? How many of them took it against their will?
Probably about 60%. I say that because when I stood on the street corner after that, as we'll go over in a minute, about 60% of the people watching me as I held my sign saying "No Vax Mandate," they didn't feel real one way or the other about the jabs. There were 20% though that were definitely in my favor that said that it never should have been mandated. But then there were 20% that were hardcore. Oh yeah, the mandates are proper. Go get the jab. You're killing grandma. So there's 40% of us, like I said, 20% who were anti-jab, 20% who were pro-jab heavily. But then there was this mushy middle of 60%. And I'm guessing that most of them probably didn't want to take the jab, but felt that they had to in order to keep their job. Hard to tell.
So now that Pete
Speculate.
Hegseth said that these orders to get the soldiers vaccinated, or take the mRNA shots, was an unlawful order. What do you think if this happened again? Let's say a bird flu epidemic or pandemic is declared tomorrow, and then a couple of months later, everybody in the military is mandated to get these shots. How many soldiers would say, "Hey, wait a minute, that's an unlawful order"?
I think it depends on who's in office. I think under the Trump administration with Hegseth in charge, very few will get the shot. They'll disobey it. They won't even try to mandate it. But if the Democrats get back in office and put it in their own administration, they'll mandate it again, and they'll make people get it or get kicked out again for another pandemic. So it depends on who's in office. We're fighting for our freedom, Cornelia, depending on who's in office.
So you didn't comply. You were one of the very few, and you were the only one who wrote an email to General Schaefer telling him. Didn't you tell him in the email, shame on you? Didn't you do that?
Yes, I did. And then this document, I accompanied this. This is the first part of a 4-page document that I sent along with that email to give people a specific reason why that I said that I will not comply with the shot. Because I wanted to let them know that it didn't come from a place of emotion. It came from a place of logic. I had looked at the issue. I had looked at the data, and our CDC wasn't putting out good data, but Public Health England was, their counterpart in the UK. And they had a document called SARS-CoV-2 Variants of Concern, Technical Briefing number 23, dated 17 September of 2021, which in Table 5 on pages 19 and 20 showed hundreds of thousands of breakthrough cases of COVID amongst the fully vaccinated by the early fall of 2021. At the same time here, they were telling us this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. They were lying to us here. But so
correct.
I wanted the general and the people on the base to know that I didn't just, irrationally make this decision. It was because I looked at data. The data was showing that the shots were not stopping people from catching COVID or transmitting it to others. We also knew by that time there was data out there about blood clots. Remember, the J&J shot, for example, had been paused temporarily in April of 2021 for blood clotting issues, for about a month. And then it was strangely brought back on until the following year, then it was taken off the shelves completely. And people were hearing about myocarditis and nerve damage and turbo cancers and all those things as well. But then I also knew it was morally wrong, right? I knew about the Nuremberg Code, that you're supposed to have voluntary consent when you're giving somebody an experimental treatment or experimental drug. We had neither, right? We weren't even allowed to volunteer for it because we were being mandated to take it. And then your consent wasn't even informed. They weren't telling you how long the shot would last, right? They thought the first 2 shots would be good enough. Then they later on said, we need to start giving boosters, right? Because these things aren't lasting long. And they didn't know about any kind of long-term side effects because this is a brand new technology. They never tried it out in humans before. So they were just wrong on all counts, morally and with what the data was showing. So I wanted to make sure the people on the base understood that, like I said, my decision was not an emotional decision. It was a very logical decision based upon the data and upon the Nuremberg Code and what is morally. We tried Nazi doctors because they experimented on Jews and other people, right, in World War II. Some of them actually went and they got hung for after they were put on trial and found guilty. So it was incredible that they just threw the Nuremberg Code away when COVID came around and the vaccines came around.
So you, Tom, when you wrote that email to General Schaefer, you had been, you were a contractor at that Air Force base, but you had been a major in the Army for what, 20 years?
Air Force, yeah.
Air Force.
I had a 20-year career, retired as a major. Never had any. I was never insubordinate. I never did anything to. I retired with full honors, and had never pushed back on any order I'd ever been given while I was in the military. And
Okay,
then, 16 years as a defense contractor after that. So 36 years with the Air Force, never had any reason to complain or disobey an order or go against what my bosses were asking. This was the very first time because I saw this was something so egregious, Cornelia. I just couldn't bring myself to do it. I didn't want to take that shot. And I was flabbergasted that they were making me take it, an experimental drug against my will.
So I'm wondering about the following. Since you were in the military, it's in the Air Force, have you ever heard about OTAs?
I'm trying to remember what the acronym stands for.
It stands for Other Transaction Agreement, or also Other Transaction Authority.
No.
So OTAs are a military acquisition pathway, which means that when the military, let's say, wants to do research or wants to buy something or wants to have a prototype built for the military, they can use something that is called an OTA, an other transaction agreement. And it's something very amorphous. It's an other transaction. It's not a normal contract, but it's something else. It's something separate, and it's a military acquisition pathway that allows the military to slash through all sorts of regulations and safety rules, etc., to quickly develop, let's say, a prototype or what they call a demonstration, or to do some research and development in a really fast and efficient way. And this tool, this other transaction authority tool that allows you to do other transaction agreements with third parties like pharmaceutical industry, like Pfizer and Moderna, these OTAs were used to manufacture the mRNA COVID shots. So it was the military that signed contracts with Moderna and with AstraZeneca and with Pfizer to manufacture not the mRNA shots, but what it says in the contracts was to manufacture demonstrations that they have the capability of manufacturing these shots. So it was a manufacturing demonstration. That's how they put it in the contracts.
Wow.
Were you?
Well,
So you said you didn't know about the OTAs.
I wasn't privy to that. That came out later, as you know, with Sasha
Yes.
Latapova, David Martin looking into
Debbie
all
Lorman. Yeah, Debbie Lorman.
Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know. I've watched your interview with Sasha and Debbie, and they've done great research on that to show the involvement, which I'm ashamed of the DoD in this whole operation.
Yes, and also that the COVID so-called pandemic was responded to by the national by this NSC, the National Security Council. It was the response was in the hands of the National Security Council, which had never before been the case.
Right. Yeah.
Because it's the it's the HHS that should be the
right. It should be the health department, not the military involved in this. Exactly.
But at that time, when you refused to take the shots, you didn't know anything about this, despite the fact that you were in the military. Or
I didn't. Yeah, that time I hadn't. I don't think I had ever watched a Sasha Latapova or a David Martin interview yet.
Do you think that somebody as high up as the third star General Schaefer would have known anything about this?
I doubt it. I think he was just going, like I say, following orders, saying he believed the mantra of safe and effective without looking into it himself. He did zero homework. He was lazy. He was a coward. He didn't push back at all and say, man, this is a new technology. He knew that at least. It was a new technology. And like I said, he should have went to bat for his troops a little bit more before just sending the order on down.
How does a coward become a three-star general?
Fairly easily sometimes. A lot of times those are the kind of people that are yes men. They'll tell their bosses above them how great they are, how wonderful things are. They won't contradict them in any way. They won't say no to them at any point. So guess who gets promoted? the the ones that have been the yes men.
So the
The
ones that
critical
accept,
thinkers, the ones that challenge, they're the ones that sometimes get slapped down because they're hey, you're not following the plan here, man. Yeah,
so the ones that accept unlawful orders are the ones who make it to general,
I think so.
potentially.
I think the ones that do whatever their bosses tell them to do without question, whether it's right or wrong.
But I hope that Pete Hegseth is going to change that.
Me too.
All right, so let's go to the next one.
Yeah, so you know what happened after I got fired? I took to the streets for about a year. From the fall of 2021 through the fall of 2022, I stood with a sign saying no vax mandate at a very busy street corner in Dayton, Ohio. This is a photo here of me with some friends. We went to the Defeat the Mandates thing in Washington, D.C., and it actually took place at the Lincoln Memorial. We walked from the Washington down to the Lincoln and watched on a very cold January day, Dr. Malone, Peter McCullough, Pierre Corey, RFK Jr., give speeches against the mandates.
Oh, you know, Tom, I went to that demo too, and
it was that day.
Yeah, that day in January.
It was
because it's around my birthday. My birthday is the 22nd of January, so I think it was exactly on that day, 22nd of January, 2022, was it, or 2021?
Yeah, 2022.
2022.
Yeah,
so, and yeah, it was a cold day, but what really shocked me. Yeah, of course it was 2022. It wouldn't have been 2021. What really shocked me was how few people were there. It was a small, given the
it was
topic,
several thousand, wasn't it?
Yeah,
I don't think it was more than a couple thousand.
I read in the newspapers supposedly it was 35,000. I think it wasn't even that. It wasn't very many people. No. The speeches were wonderful. There were lots of great speeches. Lots of very React 19 people were there, and Peter McCullough, and all sorts of other great people spoke. Yeah, so. But not many people came, and I think one reason might have been that it was just a year after J6, and I think a lot of people were just scared to go to DC to demonstrate.
Again, you're absolutely right. That's where this courage thing comes into play again, right? People, this is what happens. Tyranny wins when the people are not brave. And if more of us would have shown up that day, if more people would have said no, think about what would happen if everybody on the Air Force Base stood with me that day. They received that email and said, whether I agree to take the shot or not, maybe I'm for taking the shot, but at least everybody should be able to make their own decision. And if everybody on the base would have said, you know what, we're going to walk off the base if you don't let everybody, all the people working here, decide for themselves whether to take the shot or not. We had that power as the people. What could they have done? Could they have fired all of us? No. But because people won't stand, because they don't have the courage to stand, that's how the tyranny wins. They pick off the people one at a time, right, who challenge them. They try to isolate you, and then they pick you off. That's why they slap down these doctors so hard when the doctors, challenge the vaccines, because they come after your board certifications, your hospital, your licenses, your whole practice, because they want to make an example out of you, so they can silence the others. See what happens when you challenge the system? We're going to go after you. That's how tyranny wins.
That's right. I have lots of power over you, over everyone, every single one.
Yeah, so I stood at a busy street corner in Dayton, Ohio, with that sign for about 120 days between the fall of 2021 and the fall of 2022. There was a corner, there was a Red Lobster there, a Walmart, a Best Buy, a Lowe's, Olive Garden. 4 lanes of traffic going each way, 2 turn lanes going each way.
So this is the corner where you stood.
No, this is Washington D.C. The Defeat the Mandate.
Sorry, because I was thinking it does look like the Washington Memorial. Okay.
Yeah, but I stood in a corner in Dayton, Ohio, close to the Air Force Base, with that same sign for over a year. Mm-hmm. And that's where I noticed, like I said, out of every 100 cars that went by, 500,000 cars I probably saw over that 120 days. About 60% of the people would do nothing, already busy in their day. There was then 20% who hated me, said, get the shot, you're killing grandma, F you. But then there was 20% that did agree with me. They said, yeah, honked their horns, said, yeah, you should be able to make your own decision. But as I went through the whole year there, I started noticing there was so many things going wrong with the shots themselves. My message kind of translated, Cornelia, from not being against the vax mandate to just being against the vaccines, period. I saw what kind of damage they were doing to people. So now you can go to the next slide. We were seeing things like this happening, right? Like, pro soccer players on the grass there, just, having heart attacks right on the field, things we had never seen before. It was crazy, right?
Yep.
So go to the next slide. So then I watched that movie Died Suddenly. It came out in November of 2022. And as your viewers know, it's an hour-long documentary about the first half hour, or about half of the movie is devoted to these 6 or 7 embalmers and said they were seeing these unusual clots. If you go to the next few slides, I'm going to show the people at the expo the white fibrous clots. So they're going to get a chance to see these at the expo if they've never seen them before. Go ahead and scroll through the next 3 pictures, because basically it's just more pictures of the clots themselves. By the way, Richard Hirschman has about 250 of these photos on his phone, Cornelia, from over 250 different people.
I know,
So,
easily.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
He keeps track of these things.
You can see how tough this the substance is.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And of course, there's another mess. So when I watched that film, and I talked about it earlier, Wallace Hooker talked about the embalmers of the Ohio Embalmers Association raising their hands. So then I called the Ohio Embalmers Association the next day, verified with their now president, Woody Wilson, that he's seeing the clots in his own funeral home in Marysville, Ohio as well. So that led me to the creation of these worldwide surveys. Next slide. And in my latest 2024 survey, 250 of the 301 embalmers responding to that survey, 83%. So they're still seeing the clots to the end of 2024. Next slide. And when I asked them what percentage of your corpses are you seeing these clots in, if you average all the bars together, including the green bar, where 43 said none, you get an average of 27% of the corpses in 2024 having the white fibrous clots. This is a phenomenon they've never seen before prior to the years of COVID or the vaccines. Next slide. I then asked in that worldwide survey, has your professional or embalmer or funeral director association ever discussed the large white fibrous clots? The strange thing here is less than 20% of them, only 52 of the 301 embalmers said that their funeral director associations are talking about the clots, which is bizarre, right? Especially when 83% of the embalmers said they're seeing the clots. Why aren't they talking more about it? They're talking privately amongst themselves, but they're not talking about it publicly or at their association meetings. So next slide. So that's why we get into the question, like you said at the beginning of the thing, why? Go ahead and go to the next slide. The question is then, why are these funeral directors and embalmers, why don't they want to speak out publicly? And that's where we talked about, the fact that they have mandated the shots on their employees. And also they're making money. Business is good these days, Cornelia. There's a lot of funeral directors, they're making good money because a lot of people are dying, unfortunately. 10% excess mortality.
Yeah, but at the same time, embalmers say that the embalming takes so much longer now because it's so difficult to drain the blood out of the arteries and veins of people who have these clots. And they're finding them not just, the traditional blood clots were just found in veins, but now they're finding them in arteries where the blood flows much faster than in the vein. So
right, it's a high pressure side.
High pressure, right. And they have to use forceps. They cannot just use the drain tube because it just won't drain. So embalmings take longer. And I don't know if they increase the charge for an embalming that took longer because of white clots. Probably not.
You're right. When they find a body riddled with the clots, it takes about an hour longer to embalm. It goes from about a 1.5 hour process to a 2.5 hour process.
I doubt they say to the family, oh, my embalmer needed twice as much time, so I have to charge you twice as much, and it's because of these damn white clots.
Yeah.
I bet they don't do that.
They don't, but I'm sure they're frustrated. Now you can go to the next slide. As you know from our previous discussions, we've talked about the British Institute of Embalmers. For 3 years, I've tried to get them to take my survey, Cornelia. They refuse to do so, even though on their own website, they have a code of ethics. And key point number 4 in their code of ethics is they're supposed to do research or investigation whenever they find something unusual happening in the world of embalming. So they're violating their very own code of ethics. and their own, and if they don't want to take my survey, why don't they take their own survey? It's bizarre, isn't it? Like I think we know why.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Next slide.
She did. I don't know who wrote this. Who is the person?
Miss Karen Caney wrote that.
So,
one of her claims was she has too small a staff in order to support doing the survey. Well, all she had to do was forward my email to her email list of embalmers in their organization.
Look at the sentence here. It's very, very interesting what she says. I have received many, many email inquiries about potential new types of blood clots over the last few years. So she wrote that in 2024. So over the last few years, so let's say maybe over the last 3 years or so. So there have been many, many, she repeats the word many, many email inquiries about potential new types of blood clots. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. But then she refuses to take the survey. Yes. Doesn't make a lot of sense, does it?
Well, she knows fully well. I have tried to reply to every one of these with an individual reply rather than a standard one, and she probably really did. At times, like a few weeks ago, I did spend several hours replying to a sudden rush of emails. There appears to be a pattern of having nothing for weeks, then suddenly getting a lot of queries. So it would be really interesting if she were willing to talk to find out about how many emails she actually got, what people told her. They probably told her, oh, I'm discovering a new type of blood clot. What do you know about this? Do other embalmers find this too? And she just sends, she was probably instructed. Is she a secretary or something, or is she somebody higher up?
No, she's high up. She's like their head PR person.
Oh,
now
I
read
see.
Read the next paragraph.
All right. The next, regarding requests for sending out any surveys, I did take this to National Council, which is our ruling body. Ruling body of what? The British Institute of Embalmers?
Yes, they have like their board president and their.
Oh, I see. It's like a board or something, I guess. Okay. Yeah. After discussion, they agreed that the BIE, the British Institute of Embalmers, will only send out surveys from recognized sources such as HSE, to mention just one. HSE, that must be some British, what is that? Do you know what that is?
Government agency, probably,
some
for health.
Government, yeah. We are a small institute and do not have the staff to cope with sending out numerous outside items. Okay, so of course
I've talked to one of their embalmers who's an insider, and they don't get a whole bunch of emails requested to take surveys for this and that. It would be nothing. And like I said, the surveys that myself and my assistant Laura Kasner have devised are only 3 to 4 minute surveys. They're only about 10 questions long. Takes about 3 or 4 minutes to take.
Yeah, so you can see what she's doing here. This British Institute of Embalmers, she functions as a gatekeeper. She keeps the gate closed, and she says, "Well, go ask HSE. If we get a demand from HSE, we might be willing to send it out, but from some unrecognized source like you, no way."
Well, like I said, fair enough. They don't want to take my. Well, why aren't they doing their own?
Yeah, that's right.
Especially if she's getting many, many, many email queries.
Yeah, yes, you would think so, right? But no, their job definitely is the one as a gatekeeper, which is not surprising. Yeah. Of this British Institute of Embalmers, and it would be very interesting to find out more about what was going on there, the connections between them and the HSE, and how they were messaged that they would in no way participate in surveys like that and keep the whole discussion under wraps.
Later on in the letter, she mentions, you don't see it on the screen there, but later on she mentions that she personally has talked to a lot of embalmers, and everyone she's talked to says they're not seeing them. So if that's the case, why does she have a problem sending out the survey? All the embalmers could answer, okay, I'm not seeing these. This could be a nothing burger, and we could all go home.
Well, but it clearly is not, because she says, I have received many, many email inquiries about potential new types of blood clots.
So she's contradicting herself. Absolutely,
and
Cornelia.
You know what? These email inquiries, they don't come from people who have nothing to do with the British Institute of Embalmers, because a normal Brit has no idea that this institute even exists, I would think.
Correct.
Right? It doesn't come, I was just wondering, are there any new types of blood clots? No. these emails in all likelihood came from embalmers that are members of the British Institute of Embalmers who said, hey, you know, I've been finding this. Are there other embalmers? I'm really interested. I'm scared of these things. This is unusual. I don't know what it means. Who else has seen these? Give me some information. That must have been the kind of email I would imagine that she got.
In fact, the one insider that we have there, who's a member of the BIE, he actually asked at their last October, they had their annual convention, in-person meeting. And he asked at the meeting, he said, hey, are we going to take this survey that this retired Air Force Major guy is going to send out to us at the end of this year, like he did last year? And the board decided there, the head panel said, we're going to table that discussion. We're going to take it back and talk about it in our National Council, and then we'll give our decision. They didn't want to talk about it and decide there at the meeting in front of their whole membership. They went back and like a week later in the dark made the decision, no, we're not going to participate in the survey. They were too cowardly to say it in front of their membership, who might have objected to that. Might say, hey, we need to take this survey, right? But they made the decision in the dark after the meeting was over.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
That's what we're dealing with, Cornelia. Like I said, a lot of cowardice.
Yep.
And then, of course, we have the case of Pennsylvania, the strange case of Pennsylvania, where they participated in the 2023 survey, the best participants, with 125 embalmers from their state alone participating in that survey, to 0 the following year, despite the fact their president was seeing unusual clotting in his corpses. Very bizarre behavior. And as you know, go ahead. Next slide. Let's go through a couple of the embalmers' comments. So even though the embalmers are not coming out publicly, at least in the survey, they're telling us some things, giving us some information here as to what's actually going on. You see here in Kentucky, I've been an embalmer since the early 2000s for an embalming service. I have never seen anything like this before the spring of 2021. I've experienced the white fibrous clots that are stretched out to 20 inches. It's like battling a rubber band. My right hand and elbow has suffered from these clots. I've been saying for the last 3 years, this isn't normal. I've recently spoken with a physician that's been hearing this in his field. We are in the same agreement that we feel we know that this has come from. I think he's talking about the vaccine there. Go to the next slide.
Yes, and he doesn't say it. He doesn't dare to say it.
Exactly. Yeah, he's too afraid to say the word vaccine, and even in his anonymous. Remember, we're allowing them to answer anonymously. I have no idea, what computer that came from. We turned off the IP tracking feature in SurveyMonkey. We promised that we would keep the survey anonymous. Next slide. Here's a couple more from embalmers. One from Idaho. Sometimes I'm given the information about if someone had a certain vaccine. Sometimes I'm aware they've had 5 or 6 doses of it. These are the people that we're seeing abnormal clots or significant amount of clots. Virginia. I'm finding a lot of the white rubbery clots and had been taking pictures of them, but it's become the new normal. I don't use a drain tube anymore because of all the clots, blood clots and the fibrous white ones. My angular forceps is my go-to instrument to help remove them. Not good.
It's become the new normal.
Yeah, that's what Richard's afraid of. He's afraid that this is going to become so normal that people, they won't talk about it anymore because they'll pretend like it's always been this way. It has not. The blood has changed since 2020.
Oh, that's a scary thought. Become the new normal.
Yeah, it's scary.
All these people, they all know that it's not, it's the new, but to call it the new normal.
And that's what the people that had pushed the vaccines, that's what they're hoping, right? They're hoping that people normalize it, forget about it, don't want to talk about it, are still afraid, stay silent about it, move on. You hear a lot of people say, I don't want to talk about COVID. I want to move on from that. That was 4 or 5 years ago. Well, it's hard to move on when there's still all this death and destruction happening.
Yes.
Next slide.
But yeah. Well, it's just, the way I think human beings are. Some sort of survival mode.
And you probably remember this one. This was from a Canadian embalmer. Since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, which I assume the survey is pertaining to, I have not noticed any clots, fibrous structures, or contents in the blood outside the ordinary. It's also not our responsibility as embalmers to take note of these cases, record or share any information, as it is confidential medical information that breaches the privacy clause we have with our client families. Videos and articles such as died suddenly or anti-vaccine, COVID-denying propaganda that is based in no actual fact other than to spread right-wing beliefs and fear-mongering the public. Remember, I never mentioned the words COVID or COVID vaccine in any of the survey instructions nor any of the survey questions. So he's obviously got an opinion, though, about the vaccine, doesn't he?
Yes, and what's interesting here is that how he phrases this. He doesn't say in the comment that I have not seen any unusual clots. I haven't seen, well, I haven't seen any white clots or anything. He says, I have not noticed any clots, fibrous structures, or contents in the blood outside of the ordinary. So, well, maybe he's rationalizing that some of these clots, fibrous structures, or contents in the blood are not outside of the ordinary for some reason. Who knows how
That's not the opinion of 83% of the embalmers who took the survey.
Yeah,
They think these things are highly unusual.
Yes, and of
They
course
wouldn't be
they are.
inviting me to a Tennessee Funeral Director Association annual convention if they thought these were normal.
Yeah, but it's still interesting how how this is phrased. Nothing
I'm troubled by
outside
the
of the
next.
ordinary.
I'm troubled by the next sentence, Cornelia.
Oh, okay.
The next sentence where he says it's not our responsibility to take note of these or record them. As he's acting like there's a privacy thing going on. No, if Hirschman's not telling you that this clot came out of Mr. Jones or Mrs. Smith. He's saying I'm finding these clots, and the most he may say is in a male, maybe like between the ages of 50 and 60, or a female in her 70s, that kind of thing. But he's not giving up the ghost on who the clots came out of, and it is embalmers' responsibilities when they find something unusual, like a gunshot wound or a knife stab. They have to tell the authorities about that. They should be morally obligated as well to tell the authorities about these unusual white fibrous clots that they've never seen before prior to COVID or the vaccines.
Absolutely. I mean, this whole part here is just he's giving you a lecture, reprimanding you about what you're doing.
Exactly.
Of course, it doesn't make sense because nobody talks about which person they found them in. Of course not. Of course, that wouldn't be okay, but nobody's doing that. All right.
Yeah. And now, as you know, it's not just embalmers and funeral directors, right? It's doctors and nurses too. Go to the next slide. And we see the results of this. Prior to the pandemic, they took polls and about 70% of Americans trusted our medical system, our physicians, our doctors, our nurses. That is now down to about 40%, Cornelia. It's been cut in half, the trust level, and rightfully so, because a lot of these people are going into a doctor's office with vaccine injuries and they're being gaslit and told that you're not, or you're injured maybe, but we can't figure out why, but certainly not the vaccine that did it to you,
Oh, sorry, I lost the page here.
That's
yes,
okay.
Exactly. And I wouldn't be surprised if it were less than 40% because a lot of people are afraid to go to the hospital unless maybe you have a broken leg or an appendicitis or something. But a lot of people do not want to go near a hospital anymore.
Count me in as one of them.
Yep.
Next slide.
Yeah.
Now, as you know, in March of last year, I was contacted by a OBGYN, an obstetrician and gynecologist in Jacksonville, Florida, named Dan McDyer. And Dan has been seeing a lot of carnage himself in his own OBGYN practice in Jacksonville. And he actually did he's done one or two interviews with Dr. Brian Hooker on Children's Health Defense about all the carnage. And that's how he describes it, carnage that he has seen in women's menstrual cycles, postmenopausal bleeding, premenopausal bleeding, miscarriages, stillbirths, all kinds of things. Dan introduced me to a colleague of his, also from Jacksonville. This gentleman here, Mahana Basharat, who's a doctor. He's a cardiologist and endovascular specialist in Jacksonville. And he contacted me and said, Tom, I've been pulling these white fibrous clots out of living people for the last 4 years in my what's called a cath lab, catheterization lab, where he goes in with flexible catheters that either suck the clot out, scrape it out, or lasso it and pull it out. So, in fact, if you go to the next slide, you'll see in one of the emails that Dr. Basharat sent to me.
When did he contact you? When did he contact you, Tom?
Early March of 2024.
Okay.
And if you look on the right there, this is a deep vein thrombosis that's in the legs, in the older gentleman's calf muscle or in that area. And this is a white fibrous clot that's still covered in blood. You can see kind of a pinkish cord running down through the middle of it. After that gets cleaned off, it'll become a white fibrous clot. After that, the blood is washed off of the clot. And if you look on the far left, you see what the clot looked like when it was in his leg still. That's an angiogram. There's blockage there at the top of that screen where no blood's flowing. Then if you look at the image in the middle, now you see a nice dark stream where blood's flowing all the way through the vessel again after Bieber removed it from this gentleman. So that was a successful procedure, and his blood flow was restored to that part of the leg. So that was well done by Dr. Bieber.
It's also interesting how these grape jelly clots cling to the white fibrous clot, right?
They'll find them in combination. Yes. You'll find the white fibrous clots in combination with the grape jelly. So if you go to the next slide, there's a few more photos from Dr. Bieber. This one is out of the iliac artery. Again, you can see the lighter portions you see in there are the fibrous material mixed in with the grape jelly clot. After that gets washed off, then the white fibrous clot will show up more.
It's just covering. It's just
the iliac vein and artery are down in the pelvis region. And they feed the femoral arteries down in your legs.
Wow, this is really interesting how it covers it. And the white fibrous clot goes all the way from the tip all the way down to here, but it's absolutely covered with the red. Well,
it makes sense, right? Because it's blocking a blood vessel, so the blood seems to gum up around that, right? It can't flow freely through there.
Yeah.
This is actually what's called a pulmonary embolism. This is in the lung area. You can see how it goes down in the brachial branches of the lungs. It's called a saddle PE because you see like there's a link between the two sides at the top there. If you look especially in the upper left-hand corner, you can see where the lighter colored material is white fibrous material. And once that gets washed off, it'll become whitish in color.
It's big. It's big. And look at these
last three
many
slides I've shown. These are all removed from living people. People, Cornelia,
And you can see how big this thing is. There's the marker here. So you know how long, this is like a Sharpie or something.
Right. And these things,
this thing is huge.
Yeah. And life-threatening too. They have to be very careful about how they remove this because they
absolutely. And it's hard to remove them. Am I right? It's very difficult, and so look how symmetric this thing is.
Yeah, because there's two lungs, right? There's each side of the lung.
Yeah, two lungs. So, and it branches across the two lungs, and then it goes into the lung here with these 3, 1, 2, and here 1, 2, 3.
Exactly.
So this doctor here, Mushanat Bisharat, he was willing to speak out about this with his name.
Yeah, for about a month, he was willing to come forward, and we were getting ready to expose him to the world so he could tell the world about what he was seeing in living people. So go to the next slide after those photos.
Wow, that's amazing he did that.
Well, he didn't do it. Look what he wrote to me later that month, on one of the last days of March. Tom, I was instructed to immediately terminate all communications in this regard. Apologize for the inconvenience. Somebody got to him, Cornelia.
Yeah.
Somebody at the hospital or somebody got to him and said, hey, we don't want you talking about this with anybody. It shows you what's going on. There's a cover-up going on.
Well, but it's too late. He already talked to you about it, and he sent you these pictures.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and he didn't tell me I couldn't use his name, like I said, because he already exposed himself to me, and I can't, in good conscience, not talk about it because I know it's happening, or otherwise I'm complicit in the cover-up.
So since then, that was the last communication you had with Dr.
That's the last communication I had with him. I've tried multiple times to communicate with him again, and I cannot get him to come forward.
Well, I'm very grateful to him.
He's in his mid-40s. He's got 3 young children.
Yes.
He's probably still paying off some of his medical school costs. He realizes what's going to happen to him. If he comes out and says anything negative at all about the vaccines or even hints at it, they'll go after his license and try to destroy him, just like they've tried to destroy McCullough, Corey, Cole, Merrick.
Okay. But, he did it. He talked to you. He gave you the picture. He gave you the proof. He gave you the images. So,
yes.
Okay, so fine. So he doesn't communicate with you anymore. It doesn't really matter that much because he talked to you. You have his name. You have the images. That's really what you need. And he hasn't, has he been fired or is he still at the same
No, he's still working there because he hasn't come out publicly. Because and like I said, because the world doesn't know yet. And, and I've been trying to get on bigger media, but as you know, it's very difficult. Have not been able to get on a Tucker Carlson to talk about him, or Joe Rogan to talk about him.
So did he say that it's okay for you to talk about him having?
He didn't say it was okay for me to talk about him at all, but he didn't say it was not okay for me to to talk about him.
Okay.
He didn't say one way or the other. So I'm talking about him. Like I said, I cannot in good conscience sit on this information knowing that.
Okay.
And if you go to the next slide after his communication, go to the next slide.
Well, it is interesting. That's all he said, right? And then that was the whole email here. I was instructed to terminate our communications.
He didn't say, by no means, Tom, under no circumstances do I want you not to say anything about this to anybody.
Okay.
I think, in fact, his conscience is getting to him. I believe if the Congress actually subpoenaed him to come testify in front of Congress and under whistleblower protection, so his hospital couldn't retaliate by firing him or taking away his state board certifications, I think he would come forward and testify under oath, because I don't think he wants to lie, especially since he's given me the proof of what he's done, right? So I think he would be willing to come forward and testify publicly about it under special whistleblower protection.
Mm-hmm,
and I actually suggested that to Bobby Kennedy and Senator Ron Johnson and others, but they haven't moved out on that. It'd be nice. And they could also subpoena his colleague, Dr. Dan McDyer, also from Jacksonville, like I said, who's been seeing horrible things in his OBGYN practice and can corroborate that he's the one that introduced me to Bashir because he knew Bashir was seeing these clots.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's just one of, I don't know how many hundreds, probably thousands of vascular surgeons in the United States who have probably...
There's 6,300 vascular surgeons across the United States that are members of the Society for Vascular Surgery, which we'll talk about here in just a minute.
Yeah.
Go to the next slide after that. Dr. Philip McMillan, who runs his own YouTube channel called Vegan Health, also found his own separate cath lab whistleblower, similar to Dr. Bashir, and he did a 52-minute Substack interview with this gentleman. You don't know his name, but you hear his real voice. You only see a cartoon image of a picture of him. And in that interview, he has worked in the same cath lab for 20 years, Cornelia. He's removing anywhere between 3 to 10 of these white fibrous clots out of patients every week in his one cath lab alone. Mm-hmm. Think about that. There's 1,700 cath labs across the United States. He's removing 3 to 10 of these white fibrous clots per week in his one cath lab alone. And unlike the embalmers, like I said, these doctors do have access to the COVID vaccination records of all their patients. Mm-hmm. So he's able to tell you what brand they took, how many shots they took, when they took their shots. And he says 99% of the time when he finds the white fibrous clots, that person's been jabbed with anywhere between 1 to 8 COVID jabs. And the more jabs they've taken, the worse the clotting seems to be. Mm-hmm. But just like my whistleblower, this whistleblower went dark on Dr. McMillan as well. Dr. McMillan says he won't communicate with him anymore. So unfortunately, they've both gone dark, my whistleblower and Dr. McMillan's whistleblower on him. So go to the next slide. So what I decided to do, at least based upon those two cath lab whistleblowers' testimony, I decided to develop a survey similar to the embalmer blood clot survey that I did for the embalmers. But this one designed for vascular surgeons, cath lab workers, endovascular specialists. And I included, this time I did include a few questions about the COVID-19 vaccine, because like I said, unlike the embalmers, these doctors have access to the COVID vaccination records of their patients. They could tell us that when they're finding the white fibrous clots, did that person take the vaccine? And how many did they take? And when did they take them, right? So I sent it out to the vascular surgery societies in the United States, Canada, the UK, Australia, and New Zealand. Got back no responses from any of them except for the Society for Vascular Surgery. They're headquartered in Rosemont, Illinois, and they brag on having over 6,300 members across the United States. But they declined to take my survey.
That was the only response
you could have gotten from them.
That was the only response you got?
Yeah. The others didn't even bother to respond. I actually also sent the survey directly to about 120 vascular surgeons across the United States. Not a single one of them responded. I got 0 responses to my cath lab worker survey. Zero.
That really surprises me. I would have thought, okay, that these societies that, I mean, they are kind of captured. Who knows what kind of entanglements they have with government agencies, etc. So I'm not so surprised about that. But that you send out more than 120, you said, surveys directly to these clinics or individual vascular
surgery
surgeons,
offices,
vascular surgery offices, and you didn't get a single response. That I find breathtaking. Not a single one.
That's how tight-lipped the doctors are about this.
Are you going to do another attempt this year, trying to reach the vascular surgeons?
I might. I don't know. I think I'll probably get the same. What I
think you should. I think you should, Tom. I think that's really important.
I probably will, just to formalize the fact that I get no results again. Maybe
send it to more. Send it to 1,000. You said there are 6,300 vascular surgeons in this country, so send it to 1,000 of them. I mean, it's a lot of work, but
it's going to be a lot of looking up email addresses. That's for sure. Because that's what I do. I go to major cities. I say I'll go like to Los Angeles. And I'll say, apply for the vascular surgeon in Los Angeles.
Apply for a government grant from the NIH.
I've never accepted any money. I've done all this on my own dime, and I never want to accept money because I never want to be accused of being a grifter. Yeah. I'm not in this for the money. I'm in this for the truth, to find out what's really going on here.
Sure. But these things are expensive. Running a really good survey is an expensive and time-consuming undertaking.
Well, I do it because I love my fellow man. And I want to know the truth, right? And I want to expose those that are hiding the truth.
Well, if anybody is listening to this interview and wants to help you, just looking up, getting a list of email addresses of vascular surgeons.
That could be helpful. Yes, when I do my next survey.
Although
part of me likes to I like to send it to the same addresses I sent the previous year. That way I have consistency. Like my
and you should.
Surveys, I've sent these all 3 years, 22, 23, and 24 that I've done my worldwide embalmer blood clot surveys. I've sent it to the same 50 national, regional, and state funeral director associations and the same 1,700 funeral homes around the world directly. So I keep that. I use that same because I want to see what happens from year to year with that same set of embalmers and funeral homes and associations.
Yes, and that makes sense. Yeah, that's very good. And I would do the same with the vascular surgeons. I would send it to the same. I will send it to the same societies, to the same 120, but then I would send it to another 800 or 900 and see what happens.
That's a good suggestion. I will probably do that. So, next slide.
Awesome. That would be awesome.
What was really interesting, Cornelia, is even though the doctors were so tight-lipped and zero responded to my cath lab worker survey and vascular surgeon survey, I ran a similar survey with the people because people they're the ones going in to get these blood clots removed. So I said, well, if I can't get good information from the doctor end, maybe I can get it from the patient end. So then I had Clayton Morris and his wife, Natalie, on Redacted News advertise a survey. Also, Dr. John Campbell, the old gentleman in the UK who does YouTube channel, they advertised a survey that I ran for the people. And one of the questions I asked them is, what years, mark all apply, have you or the person that you know have had these blood clotting issues? Well, I had over 1,400 responses in just a couple of weeks, Cornelia, to this survey. So the patients are happy to tell you about their blood clotting experience, even though the doctors don't want to talk about it at all. And what's really shocking on this slide is, notice I asked what year you had your blood clotting issue. Only 79 of the people of the 1,400 said they had their blood clotting issue in the year 2020, which is the year we had the COVID virus, but no vaccine yet. So it doesn't appear the COVID virus is driving a whole lot of blood clotting. But look what happens in 2021 after the rollout of the vaccines. The bar goes to 520 having blood clotting issues. Yep. And it stays that high through 2022, 2023, and 2024. So I don't know what this slide's telling you, but it's telling me that it's not the virus that's the culprit as much as it is the vaccines and causing the blood clotting.
At this clotting that they saw, so this is all kinds of clotting. So
that's correct. It could be grape jelly, it could be white fibers, it could be micro clotting, any type of clotting.
Okay. Are you going to run this survey for patients again this year?
Yeah, why not?
I think you should. I think you should, yeah. And then ask them to differentiate if they know what kind of clots they were dealing with.
Yeah. Sometimes that's hard to find, but yeah,
They
it's
might
hard to
not
tell
even
because when the
know.
clot's still inside the person, you don't know. Yeah.
It would also be interesting to know how many of them actually know what kind
Well,
of
we have
clots
we
they
have a little bit of an
had.
idea of what type of clot it is based on one of the next slides coming up. Try the
Okay.
next slide
Okay.
coming up. We asked them, I guess I didn't put it in this deck. One of the slides I put in the deck is how was your clotting issue resolved? And in that, about 400 of them said it hasn't been resolved yet. They still have the blood clotting issue. About 100 said the clotting issue went away by itself, which was great. There was about another 300 that said that they had it, they were able to use clot busting drugs like tissue plasminogen activator to dissolve the clot. And those were probably the grape jelly clot types because they dissolve easily using clot busting drugs like TPA.
Yes.
But then there were about 300 of them that said they had to have the clot physically removed. So I suspect that most, if not all, those were these white fibrous clots that just won't dissolve the clot busting drugs. So then those doctors have to go in and physically remove them with those flexible catheters that either suck them out, scrape them out, or lasso and pull them out. Then there was another about 250 that said the person died from the blood clot. They weren't able to get it out in time. So it's unfortunate, right? A lot of people are dying.
Okay, so that's an indication that a lot of these clots are, in fact, the white fibrous ones. I remember that slide from back then, and I remember that a lot of people said that they still have the clot.
Right, they still have
the issue is not resolved, which also seems to point to this is not easily taken care of with blood thinners that could bust.
And people that have had clots removed have had clots reform again, which tells you that maybe their body has turned into a spike protein factory, right? That their mRNA is continuing to produce spike in their body. So even if they had clotting removed, the clotting comes right back again. And Dr. Peter McCall is afraid this could be indefinite, could happen possibly for the rest of that person's life if the mRNA just doesn't go away, which is really, because it was, remember the shots, they said the mRNA was supposed to go away within 2 days to a week after you've taken the shot. It's supposed to stay in your upper,
stay in your
deltoid muscle. Yeah, stay in your deltoid muscle only be around for 2 days to a week, then go away. It doesn't do that. It travels all over your body, and they found there's been scientific papers proving that it's existing for more than 700 days. McCullough thinks it's actually going to be indefinite. It was only 700 days because that's when the study stopped. If they continued the study, they probably would have found it lasting longer.
Yes, and they should make that clearer when they talk about these studies, because it's always up to whatever 700 days it is now, right? But it's only because, well, we don't know. That's the end of the study, and we don't know how much longer it's going to be. So it might vary. That doesn't mean that that's somehow the maximum. This magic 700th day. This was such a blatant lie about saying that it stays in your arm. That was such such a criminal lie to tell that to people, because Pfizer knew, everybody knew, the governments knew, the Australian government knew, the American government knew that this was not true. That was not true at all.
Yeah, they knew those lipid nanoparticles are so small they could even pass through the blood-brain barrier. They could get up in your brain.
They could go through the placenta. That would have been very easy to understand just looking at these tables of where they all ended up, that they would gather in the ovaries, in the spleen, and the liver. Of course they knew that. So lying to entire populations like that is an unbelievable crime.
They lied to a planet of 8 billion people, and they suckered 5.5 billion of us. 2/3 of the planet took at least one of these shots.
Yeah,
2/3 of the planet took
and it's
intentional.
And it's, of course, intentional. All right. So
this slide, that last one, by the way, this gave me great confidence that the people taking this survey, the 1,400 that took this people's blood clot survey, were answering honestly and accurately. Because I asked them where their blood clot was located, and legs was the number one answer, followed by lungs, followed by brain, followed by heart, etc. And that just happens to match perfectly, Cornelia, the CDC's own vSafe free text data field. ICANN folks FOIA'd the CDC to get that information. They did not want to turn it over, but a judge made them do so. And I've been going through those Excel spreadsheets and looking on the term blood clot. And guess what? The batting order is exactly the same in the CDC's own vSafe data. Legs is the number one location, followed by lungs, followed by brain, followed by heart. So it tells me the people taking my survey they were being honest and accurate about it.
What's also interesting here is the number of other areas. Please specify.
Yeah.
And that it's, everywhere: nose, eye, arm, uterus, etc. We also know that there were blood clotting issues in the placenta, because one of these recent studies showed the number of placental infarction. So that means the blood supply in the placenta is cut off, probably because of clotting issues. So
maybe
there's no more
that's the
blood
answer
supply.
to our 19-week question. We saw that thing earlier from the Embalmers that he saw the stillbirths at 19 weeks. Maybe that's why. Maybe that's when the placenta gets choked off by the.
Could be.
Yeah.
Could be.
Next slide. So we, again, just like our embalmer surveys, this people survey, I gave people the opportunity to talk about their particular situation. Here's one from a surgical nurse. Surgical nurse seeing a huge increase in clots. We're doing more amputations than I've seen in my whole career. I'm definitely seeing the clots you're describing. When I say it's probably due to the COVID shot, everyone ignores me and there's silence in the operating room. I also hear the surgeons saying, I've never seen anything like this before. Also, during heart surgeries, the surgeons are having difficult time suturing as the tissues are just falling apart. Once again, the surgeons are saying, I've never seen anything like this before. A lot of patients are dying.
Tissues are just falling apart.
Yeah, that's an indication of something called vasculitis. We know the spike protein is doing so much damaging. It's not only causing these blood clots, it also is destroying the walls of our blood vessels, our veins and arteries, and it's causing those veins and arteries to collapse. In fact, Dr. Jordan Vaughn in Birmingham, Alabama, recommends to a lot of his patients that are suffering to have stents put in, particularly in their iliac vein. They're having what's called iliac vein compression. They're having that vessel's closing down on them due to the damage to the walls. So that he's had some success and had one gal that she was on Full Measure TV program with Cheryl Atkinson. She was a young girl runner, really good runner in high school, and she had to stop running because of this iliac vein compression. Now she has a stent put in that she's able to run on the track again. So it's done wonderful.
That's very interesting, Tom. Can you send me the link to that interview or article or what it is with this?
Yeah, I think I could find it.
Woman?
It was one. Yeah, okay. Cheryl has interviewed Dr. Jordan Vaughn several times. And,
yes. Okay, that would be great. I'm going to put it into the description. That's very interesting. And also interesting here with the silence in the operating room. So she says, everyone ignores me and there's silence in the operating room. Well, nobody in the operating room said, oh no, that's nonsense. It has nothing to do with COVID. There was just silence. So,
because they know they're not supposed to talk about it at the risk of losing their job.
Yeah, they probably agree.
This next one's really wild. It says, I was feeling fine, had pain left side below shoulder blade, started sweating and feeling weak, called the ambulance. ECG did not show heart attack. Rushed to emergency. ECG did not show heart attack. Third different emergency. Doctor did ECG and an ultrasound. They were all perplexed. A cardiologist was called. I went to a heart institute. Arriving there, I went into cardiac arrest. Was out 2 minutes, 3 sets of compressions and 4 defibrillator shocks used. They went in through an artery at the wrist. They removed fibrous clot. They did not want to tell me, but a nurse whispered to me, it's the vaccine. We have so many. Follow-up appointment with the cardiologist. I asked the question directly. The doctor looked down and said, I cannot talk about it at the risk of losing my job. That's what's going on, Cornelia.
Yeah, what an open and free society we live in.
And like I said, unless these doctors, these vascular surgeons, endovascular specialists, cath lab workers, embalmers, funeral directors, they're the only ones that see what's going on inside our veins and arteries. If they don't tell us, we don't know. The carnage goes on. Next slide. And unfortunately, it's not just them that are being silent about this. It's a lot of our own media. Even the conservative media, the alternative media doesn't want to talk about it. This is a photo of me last September 2024. I went to a meet and greet with Tucker Carlson at his event in Hershey, Pennsylvania, and I presented him with this vial of clots to keep. I also gave another vial to his producer, Samantha. I have not heard back from Tucker since then. He doesn't seem to have any interest at all and wanting to have me on his show to talk about this most spectacular of all the COVID-19 vaccine side effects.
So on this
Very
picture,
strange.
you see how you show him the vial, a vial filled with these white fibrous clots. You
Yeah.
show it to him, and he is shaking your hand, and at the same time, he's not looking at you. He seems to be transfixed by what's inside the vial, right?
Here's the way the exchange went. I said, Tucker, let me introduce you to the most spectacular side effect of the COVID-19 vaccines. And he said, is this for real? I said, it's for real, Tucker. Then the next thing he said is, I'm sure glad that I didn't get the shots. So I thought that was kind of funny. He's proud of the fact that he's not jabbed.
And what happened then? What happened then after he said that?
That was the end of it. That was the end of we had a couple of photos taken, and that was it. And he kept the vial of clots in his pocket. I walked over to his producer, Samantha, gave her another vial of clots, a separate one. So they have 2 vials, he and Samantha do. And also gave him a flyer of how to contact me and that I need to be on the show because these things are being found in a high number of corpses, right? 27% of the corpses are containing these clots. This is not a rare phenomenon. But unfortunately, I have not been asked to be a guest on Tucker's show. What's really interesting is Clayton Morris from Redacted News. Clayton's had me on his show 3 or 4 times. He's very willing to talk about this, he and his wife, Natalie. And Tucker had Clayton Morris up to his cabin and did about an hour and a half interview with him 2 or 3 months ago. And during that interview, it's about an hour and a half interview, Clayton Morris mentions a couple of times the white fibrous clots to Tucker during their interview.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
at 2 separate spots. At about the half-hour point and about the hour and a half point, he mentioned the white fibrous clots twice to Tucker. Okay. Tucker acts like he doesn't know what's going on. He doesn't say anything about, I know all about that. This guy gave me a vial of these things last September. He never mentions that, never talks about it, acts like he knows nothing about the clots.
I have to listen to that interview. So he mentions the white fibrous clots twice in the interview. And how does Tucker reacts as if he hadn't heard about them before? As if he
didn't know about the clots. When he, like I said, has his own personal vial of them from me. So
that's very interesting.
I would expect the leftist media, the mainstream media, who's sponsored by Big Pharma, not to want to talk about this. I get it, right? These CNN, MSNBC, ABC, CBS, the major stations, they're all sponsored by Big Pharma. So I understand the reason why they don't want to have me on the news at night talking about these white fibrous clots that seem to be strongly linked to the COVID vaccines. But I cannot understand why the Tucker Carlsons, the Joe Rogans, the Glenn Becks of the world do not want to have me on their show. And I've tried and tried and tried to get on these shows and have not been able to, because this is, the only alternative we have for alternative media. Thank goodness Yanya Kellick and the folks at the Epic Times did put me on. That was good. Cheryl Atkinson put myself and Richard Hirschman on an episode of Full Measure. That was good. We've been on Del Bixby's The High Wire. That was good, but we're not hitting a lot of the most major people on an alternative media that's even on our side of the aisle.
Have you
tried? There seems to be a gag order out not to talk about this. Like the Trump administration doesn't want you to bring this up. I don't know if they've instructed Tucker and Glenn Beck and Dan Bongino and Joe Rogan not to talk about this, but for some strange reason, they don't want to talk about this.
So you emailed Joe Rogan's producer and asked about?
Yes.
And no, did you get any response? Did you get a response?
Megyn Kelly. How about Megyn Kelly? Megyn Kelly's been injured by the jab. She has an autoimmune disorder. Her booker sent me back an email saying, right now we're busy with other topics. Right now we don't want to talk about this. So it's like, what is going on here? I would think Megyn would be chomping at the bit to want to talk about this. Mm-hmm. She's like, she was injured by the jabs. This is her way to get back at him. To say, hey, here's a side effect that's being caused by the jabs. And we've got pretty solid proof of it. So
did you try Jordan Peterson?
Jordan Peterson doesn't really tackle this issue. I think I did try sending one email to him, never got a response. But it wasn't to Jordan directly. I think it was to a booker, that's a gatekeeper, right? who may or may not have passed my information to Jordan. So
yeah, he hasn't talked much about it, but maybe try that one again. The silence that they don't want to talk about, like Joe Rogan, Tucker Carlson, that's really ominous. I mean,
it is. It's not a good sign either, is it? I'm hoping that the dam will break, that they'll change their minds, that they'll understand that this is still going. And I'm encouraged by what happened with the Tennessee Funeral Directors Association, right? That now, they've invited me to speak to them. So maybe the dam is starting to break now, and maybe things will open up. So, I still love to come on the show. I don't want to badmouth them too bad, because I actually want to be a guest on their show. But the public needs to know that they have been contacted. They know about the existence of the clots, yet they do not want to talk about it on their shows.
Well, it's also possible that he would really like to talk to you about it on the show, and that there is something that we don't know that makes that prohibitively expensive for him or impossissible for him. We don't really know.
I'm trying the best I can. I'm trying to get at him every way that I can, every angle I can. I spent $1,600 to go to Hershey, Pennsylvania. I spent $1,600 of my own money to get 30 seconds with him and a picture taken with him, so I could do exactly what you see here: present the clots to him in person and give him his own vial.
Right.
So I'm trying. So I'll wrap up my presentation at Tulsa next weekend. Basically what's going to happen next time, right? There may be another pandemic where they try to force vaccinate you with something against your will. And remember, once it goes inside your body, it never comes out. They could also try tyranny of another sort, right? They could do central bank digital currencies, right? And try to get rid of the dollar. They could try to do 15-minute cities on you. Who knows what they're going to do? The shots, though, the fact that people bowed and took the shots, that they were not critical thinkers, the fact that they just blindly took the shots. If you go to the next slide, you can see what happens. When you do things blindly or in fear, bad things can happen. The fibrinogen on the left, that's what your fibrinogen is supposed to look like when it converts into the protein called fibrin, your blood clotting protein. Nice, smooth spaghetti noodles, and that collect platelets and red blood cells and form a nice clot for you, and then break down easily. Not what's on the right, when your fibrinogen combines with a spike protein either from the COVID-19 vaccine or from the COVID virus, produces this nasty matted mess, twisted with all these nasty nodules on it. If you go to the next slide.
Yeah, it really does look nasty. But I wouldn't say that people took the shots blindly. I don't think that's fair, because, I certainly back then, I was not a person who thought that the American government was out to kill its own population. That would have struck me as a completely preposterous idea. And I think 99.999% of everybody else would have agreed with that. So when all this happened, there was basic trust of the citizens into the government, into the institutions, as there has to be in any functioning human society. So people didn't take it blindly. They had basic trust into their government. They had basic trust into the institutions. They had basic trust that this is indeed something like a constitutional republic, where people have some say and where the government is not out to kill and harm vast numbers of the population. It's not like we were living under Mao Zedong.
Right. And you're right. And I don't fault anybody who took the vaccine, because people did it out of the goodness of their heart, right? They wanted to protect not just themselves, but grandma too. They didn't want to kill grandma. So, but I guess what I'm going to tell the audience is they need to be maybe a little bit more discerning next time, because, right, those institutions now should have lost your trust, because it's been proven now they lied to us, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
So they do not deserve your trust any longer. So if they tell you to take another vaccine next year for a different ailment, you ought to think twice, especially if it's an mRNA-based vaccine. I wouldn't take it. So if you go to the next slide.
Yeah. And then the question is, of course, how can a society function without basic trust of the majority of citizens into the society's institutions?
And it really is, it's damaged the nation psychologically. I don't think we're as close and as connected as we used to be, because people are now, they're not only just doubting their their government, they're also doubting, like I said, the medical system. They may even be doubting their own friends, their own circle of, family, because people, once you get burned and burned badly like that, then you start to lose trust, and a society can break down, can it, Cornelia?
Oh, yes. And it has broken so many families. I mean, like in my own family, it goes through, I don't know if there's any family in the United States that hasn't been touched by this. And many families, people don't talk to each other anymore. It has divided, has led to a deep division of families.
Yes, absolutely.
And friends, acquaintances.
Absolutely. You can go to the next slide. So this is just a photo of Justin Bieber and his wife, Haley. As you know, in 2022, shortly after they got the COVID-19 vaccine, he suffered a palsy, right? They called it Ramsay-Hunt syndrome, but he had a droopy one side of his face, kind of ruined his whole singing career. His wife, Haley, had a blood clot. She had a mini stroke. He was 28 at the time. His wife was 25 at the time. How many 28 and 25-year-olds do you know getting palsies and mini strokes? What probably happened to them is they probably caught a hold of a bad batch of the vaccine. They may have gotten that out of the same bad batch together, gotten their shots together and got this a shot out of the same bad batch, is my guess. But they stayed silent about it. They didn't talk. They didn't say, you know what, we think we've been injured by the vaccine. They could have stopped a lot of young people from taking shots if they would have said, hey, we took this thing. We think it injured us. They could have caused some vaccine hesitancy that would have kept others from getting injured as well. But they stayed silent about it. So did people like Jamie Foxx, Gal Gadot, who's the Wonder Woman in the movies. She had a blood clot on the brain, There was also the case of Damar Hamlin. Remember the football player for the Buffalo Bills who collapsed? They called it commotio cordis during a Monday Night Football game with the Cincinnati Bengals. He actually was a vaccine-induced myocarditis, because he got back. If it had been commotio cordis, he would have stayed down after he got hit. But he didn't. He got back up, adjusted his helmet for a couple seconds, then he fell down again. It was a vaccine injury that he was afraid to talk about when he was interviewed by Michael Strahan. So if these people had come out back then and been brave and said, I think the vaccine injured me here, but they didn't do that. They stayed silent, and people continued to get the shots. So I wonder what's on their mind now, because they were cowards and didn't talk about it when they could have and should have, and could have influenced millions of Americans not to take the shots or even have the shots pulled off the shelves because of such a high-profile person getting injured by them.
Yes, there's probably a lot of deep regret among many, and also a deep desire to see justice done, to see people actually acknowledging what happened, because that hasn't happened, and then people being held accountable.
Yeah, you're right. We haven't seen any justice at all. We haven't seen any apology. All we've seen is doubling down of anything.
Yeah.
Next, there was one person though who stood tall, Novak Djokovic.
Yeah, I love that guy. He's great.
Yeah, greatest tennis player of all times, won more Grand Slams than any tennis player living, any player in history. He refused, as you know, to take the COVID-19 vaccine back when it was being mandated to play on the tour. And he had to sit out for about a year and a half, not playing in some of the majors like the Australian Open, the US Open, not allowed to play because he didn't take the jab. But he stood strong. He proved that he'd rather fight for freedom than chase after trophies, even though he was in the prime of his career, winning a lot of these majors. So next slide. I went and saw Novak at the very first singles tournament he played back in the United States in August of 2023. He played in Cincinnati, and I wore that shirt that said "Pure Shot by Pure Blood" on it. And then I had him sign that blue shirt. If you go to the next slide, you'll see that shirt. I spelled Novak instead of Novak the way it's supposed to be spelled. It's Novax. Novak's Djokovic is his own man.
Yes.
He signed down near the O.
Yeah, right. But
what was interesting there, Cornelia, is at that tournament, there's thousands of people there. I was the only one wearing this kind of a shirt and acknowledging this. There was signs saying, "You're the GOAT. We love you, Novak." It was the first time this man had been back in our country in a year and a half from being banned from being played for because he didn't take the dumb jab. So after he signed that shirt, I went around the entire inside of the stadium, outside the stadium and all the way through the food court area for about the next half hour, holding the shirt up. And I said, see, Novak Djokovic likes this shirt. He signed it. They made him sit for 2 years because of this stupid jab. But Novak proved that he'd rather fight for freedom than chase after trophies. I just kept repeating that over and over again as people looked at me. And probably everybody in the place saw, because I went through every place in the whole tennis complex. There's dozens of courts out there, matches being played on all of them, thousands of people there. As I was going through, I started collecting security people behind me. My sister was with me.
You were?
Yeah. I had about 5 or 6 security people behind me. And then one of them finally came up to me and said, sir, we're going to have to ask you to leave because you're disturbing the other patrons. So I said, well, if I put my shirt away, can I go back to my seat in the main stadium? Because Coco Gauff, the American female tennis star, was going to play in the next match. And I had these really expensive seats, but they said, no, sir, we're going to have to ask you to leave now.
Wait
I didn't
a
bother.
minute. They wouldn't let you go back to your seat even when
no.
it
didn't make any. I wasn't there to see Coco Gauff. I was there to show support for Novak.
You weren't violent or anything. You were just showing.
No. And all I was doing was talking loudly in the crowd, showing a T-shirt.
How long did it take? How long did it take before you collected these 5 security people behind you?
Oh, I probably collected one after the first 5 minutes, and a second one after the next 5 minutes, and then, like I said, after about the half hour, then I had about 5 or 6 of them behind me and my sister.
All right. So you
got
half an hour.
I didn't object. I just walked out.
Okay.
My mission was done. Yeah. And I got a chance to shake Novak's hand and say thank you for standing up to the COVID tyranny.
What did he say when he saw? What did he say to you when he saw the T-shirt?
What was funny is the match ended early. He was playing Alejandro Fokina, who pulled up with an injury in the first game of the second set. Novak had won the first set. And so the match ended early. So they had to figure out how are we going to kill a couple hours until Coco Gauff comes on the court for her scheduled time. So they decided to do an interview with Novak. And they said, well, hey, Novak, how's it feel to be back in Cincinnati after a couple of years? He could have said, well, I would have liked to have been here last year, but you wouldn't let me come. But he didn't say that. He said it's nice to see the fans again. He was real gracious. And then after the interview ended, he went over to the side of the court and he signed the large tennis balls the kids had. Then he walked towards me and he passed me. I always had a Wright standing right behind the baseline, right at the fence in the very first row. So I was right there within my T-shirt. He goes past me and he goes over to the corner, and there was a bunch of Serbians there with the Serbian flag. That's where he's from, Serbia. And he's cheering with them and he signs their flag. Then he comes to me last, Cornelia, and he sees the shirt I'm wearing and he sees the shirt that he's signing. And that's why I apologized for my country and said, thank you for standing up to the COVID tyranny. I apologize for my country. And then after he signed the shirt, he did something he did with nobody else. He took the pen out of his right hand, Cornelia, and then he extended his right hand to me to shake it.
Oh. So he shook your hand.
Yeah.
Wow.
We had a moment.
Wow, that's amazing. Smiled. Did he say anything?
And he said nothing. And then after he signed my shirt, he walked down the tunnel.
Oh wow.
That was it.
So he didn't shake the hand of anybody else, just yours.
No, well, he signed their stuff, but he didn't shake. He made a special point to come to me last and shake my hand.
So he probably he must have noticed the shirt and what it said on there.
Oh yeah. And then
he came to you last.
What's wonderful about that whole story is after that he went on to win that tournament in Cincinnati, beating number 1 Carlos Alcaraz. Right. And then the next month he went to the U.S. Open and he won the U.S. Open, sponsored by Moderna.
Sponsored
by Moderna.
That's hard. Yeah. It was sponsored by Moderna.
Sponsored by Moderna. God. And he won the U.S. Open. So that shirt, I'll never give that shirt away. It's just very powerful and meaningful to me.
Well, I bet. Well,
he stood up like he did.
I would hate, knowing all we know now, I would hate to participate in anything that is sponsored by Moderna or Pfizer. They can go to hell.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
But really. That's what I'm going to try to leave the people with encouragement if Novak is willing to give up his tennis career as the number one player in the world because he, like I said, he wants his medical freedom, then that speaks volumes, right? There's some things in life that are more important than money, trophies,
Absolutely.
the love of the people, whatever.
Yep. Yep.
The records.
That's right. That's right.
So,
wow.
Sorry, I got emotional there at the end, but I can't talk about that story without getting emotional.
Wow. Yeah, that's an amazing story. That's an amazing story. And I'm so glad that, you know, you really deserve that story. You really, I mean, Djokovic probably had no idea who you are, but I bet he would love what you're doing.
Well, like I said, I think I'm the first person that apologized on behalf of my country to him, I believe, because like I said, nobody else in that stadium was apologizing.
Well, you don't even have to apologize
on behalf. It was the very first singles match that he played.
It's not the country. There's a very powerful shadowy elite of people who are responsible for this, and it's not the country. It's not the American people who have caused this. Thank you so much, Tom. Ed.
My pleasure, Cornelia. And like I said, my warning to the people is, and the people that are going to this Red Pill Expo event, they're the brave kind of people. They're the ones that have stood up to the tyranny. That's why they're red-pilled. So I'm going to, encourage them to not just be red-pilled silently by themselves, but also then to speak out, right? Try to bring others along. So that's how we defeat the tyranny, is when we all group together and say, this is wrong. What you're trying to do to us is wrong. And you have to have strength in numbers. So it requires those of us who are in the smaller group that are maybe a little bit more brave than others to speak out, and then the others can join us, right? The mushy middle that I talked about earlier. They can join us. Yes. We can give them the courage. But that's what happened when I was at that street corner, when I had that no vax mandate sign. One car would start honking in agreement with my sign, and a chain reaction would start. Soon they had 3, 4, then all of a sudden 10 cars are honking at the intersection. Like, right on, man. But it took that first car to get the courage to honk the horn, and the others joined in.
Yeah, we act in herds, and that can be a terrible thing if the whole herd does the same bad stuff.
Exactly.
But it can also be a good thing when one person finds the courage and the second person finds the courage to follow that first person. And then at some point, very quickly, the dam breaks and there's a new herd, but going in the right direction. So,
amen.
Yeah, right. So
courage is contagious.
Exactly. Courage is contagious, and cowardice is contagious too. Now, I think this Red Pill Expo is going to be really interesting. I hope there are lots of people, and I hope you get to talk to a lot of people. I mean, after you have given your presentation, there will be so many people who will want to talk to you. And
I'll be there 2 days.
Yeah, which is great. You can gather information
as well.
Yes, you can gather information about blood clots, about what people know. There's so much you're going to find out and learn. It's going to be great.
Oh, I love meeting the people, because especially the people that get it, the ones that are out there, the ones that are warriors, the ones like yourself, the ones that they don't want to live under tyranny. They don't want to live that way. And that's regardless of whether it's a Biden administration or a Trump administration. Mm-hmm. They do not want to live under tyranny. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to meeting those kind of people.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much, Tom.
Thanks, Cornelia, for having me.